It's like you're on a ledge and now someone's stepping on your fingers. So that's how it feels.
That's Blue Ridge Unified School Superintendent Michael Wright. He says that someone who is stepping on his fingers is Governor Doug Ducey. Ducey coming under intense pressure from educators and lawmakers. They want him to call a special session of the legislature in the waning days of his term to avert a $1 billion fiscal cliff for K-12 public schools next year. Welcome back to Square Off. Prominent Republican and Democratic lawmakers are going public, saying they had a deal with the governor to lift a spending cap on K-12 public schools in a special session, and they have the votes to pass it now. Will Ducey go along and call the special session, and what happens if he doesn't? I'll put that question and more to our political insiders. Stacey Pearson, co-founder of the Democratic consulting firm Lumen Strategies, and Marcus Dell'Artino, a Republican consultant at First Strategic Public Affairs. Welcome back to Square Off. So here's what's at stake: $1.4 billion that lawmakers budgeted for K-12 public schools this past spring, but because of a legislative relic known as the Aggregate Spending Limit, AEL, you know it well, Marcus. The schools won't be able to touch this money by the time March arrives. Budget cuts and layoffs could ensue. Marcus, give us a bit of history here. Why is this expenditure limit still with us?
Well, and I should tell you, the legislature kind of wants to look at ways to modernize this somehow. But it came into the statutes a long time ago. And with our increased revenue, we've had some pretty big jumps in education funding. With those big increases, it's been bumping up against this aggregate expenditure limit. So even though the money's been appropriated, the money can't be spent. And these schools are now coming into their budget time when they're trying to do their planning. And they won't be able to actually spend the money that they've been appropriated unless this aggregate expenditure limit is moved up.
And the legislature had to deal with the cap this past session to deal with the previous year's problem. They eliminated the cap but didn't do away with the problem. So, Stacey, with the holidays coming up and his term ending January 2nd, Doug Ducey would have to call a special session really in the next 2 weeks. Is there any evidence he'll do that?
Certainly the pressure is mounting for him to do that. And to conclude his tenure as governor, he should take the win and walk off the field with his arm in the air. I mean, this should not be something that he punts to Governor Hobbs to fix, because inevitably, the expenditure limit's going to be raised. So it's a matter of who's going to take the win.
Okay, so here's the hard political question. Who thought this was a good deal when they made it back in the spring? Punting this to a lame duck governor and an uncertain legislature of uncertain composition sometime between Thanksgiving and Christmas to fix a problem that it doesn't appear the governor cares much about. K-12 public schools aren't giving him awards the way the choice movement is. Who thought this was a good idea?
Well, remember, the deal was, as I understand it, was in trade for ESAs and in trade for traditional public education getting over $1 billion into the classroom, I will call a special session after the election in order to raise the AEL. Now what's happened is, as you can see, there's some question about whether the governor's going back on his word to call that special session. And to Stacey's point, there's a couple things here. One is you're taking $1.4 billion out of the economy, so I'm doubtful we're not going to raise the expenditure limit, right? That's a bad financial move. Two, we're getting up at this point where you're talking about the governor's legacy. You sort of don't want it marred by this going on in the last bit. You'd rather go out on your high note. He's been talking about ESAs and historic tax cuts. There was a big dinner the other night celebrating all his wins. I think he wants to be able to keep that going. And three, I think people forget about this. Charter schools really don't exist in huge numbers in rural Arizona. Private schools certainly do not. So for these schools in Blue Ridge, Arizona, or Springerville, or Lake Havasu, or Page, this is a big deal, not only for their local economies, but for the parents.
I still don't understand why they made this deal. It's like me telling a home seller to fix my house after he sold the home to me. I mean, really. And if this doesn't get done, it gets kicked to Katie Hobbs, Governor Katie Hobbs, and a Republican legislature, and they're going to have to work this out by March sometime. Right.
Well, and that's just it. They took Governor Ducey, they being the Democrats, took Governor Ducey at his word, and now it's a question of whether or not he's going to stick to his word.
I just don't get why they ever took that deal. Quickly, Joe Biden making his first trip to Arizona as president. He's going to a chips plant Not the border. I get you want to celebrate your successes and not your problems.
You're stealing my line.
Oh, no.
He's not going to the border because it's a complete liability for him. It's a complete failure by this administration to address anything on the border. Even look at Kyrsten Sinema and Mark Kelly from his own party are disagreeing with him on immigration policy and dealing with the border. So clearly he doesn't want to come there. I don't think he'll be able to avoid it, will be my question. I think the press will be there. The press is going to want to ask questions about the border. So you can come celebrate the chip manufacturing plant, which he's doing across the country. Just did groundbreaking in Syracuse, who, by the way, has more water than we do, so they got that other plant. But I don't think that he'll be fully able to escape.
Okay, a fairly successful midterm for the president. Doesn't he have to do something about the border, something meaningful and obvious in the next 2 years?
Well, it's not just about the border. It's about immigration policy writ large. When you've got ranchers, Republican ranchers on the border asking for labor, when we've got watermelon farmers saying, hey, we can't get enough labor to come get these melons out of the ground. I mean, there's going to have to be comprehensive immigration reform. And the fact that he still has a viable path to do that, I think is key.
You think he still has a path?
I do. With a split Senate and with a slim majority in the House, I think there are enough border state Republicans that may want to look at this.
Certainly not from Arizona. We've seen that before. 2024 is here already, right? Let's talk about Senator Kyrsten Sinema. She could face a Democratic primary challenge in 24, perhaps from Congressman Ruben Gallego of Phoenix. We shall see. I don't know if you're a skeptic, Marcus. Let's listen to Sinema's reaction after the Senate passed a landmark bill last week protecting same-sex marriage. Let's hear that bite.
I can't wait for people all across the country to be able to talk to their children and their children's children about the time in America when we made it completely normal for families to be together and love each other and take care of each other.
Sinema, the first bisexual member of Congress, was quite emotional there, and she followed that up with a pointed Twitter thread that started with, when Roe versus Wade was overturned, many worried that would be what would be next. We saw elected officials drum up outrage to fuel clicks and retweets. Outrage can help propel political stars, but it doesn't solve problems, and it doesn't improve people's lives. Her point, we improve people's lives. We protected people here from one of the great fears after Roe versus Wade, which was that Republicans in Congress might go after same-sex marriage. Sinema did something about it. How strong a selling point will that be in 2024?
Oh, I think that's immeasurably important. And what is between the lines, under the initial text, is Senator Sinema found a way for government to function with the filibuster in place. And so, which we all know has been designed or used to prevent whiplash in American governments at the highest levels. So she found the 60 votes to get this heard and then ultimately get it passed.
And that's her point. She gets stuff done.
Yeah, I mean, this is somewhat humorous to me because whether it's this particular bill you're talking about, the CHIPS Act that she worked hard on, the infrastructure bill, which brought more millions of dollars into Arizona, she has been key to getting the Biden administration's legislation through. There's no doubt about it. But there's a fight within the Democratic Party that she's not doing enough. I don't get it, is basically what I'm trying to tell you. And we want to focus on, certainly Republicans having problems in that party, but I will tell you this, I think this highlights the fact that the Democrat Party is not very far behind.
Real quick, if Democrat Raphael Warnock wins the U.S. Senate runoff election in Georgia this week, how would a 51-49 Democratic Senate versus the current 50-50 affect Sinema's clout? Marcus?
I think if you just the bills I just listed, I mean, she's established herself as sort of a key member for the Democratic Party to moving legislation and getting stuff done. And I think part of the frustration in this country is Congress doing nothing. So the fact that they're doing something is helpful.
Well, Senator Sinema is going to remain key in getting over that filibuster threshold. And so that her position, her importance there is not going to change.
Not changed. All right, when we come back, Kari Lake's getting ready to challenge her defeat in the governor's race. A former Republican governor has some wisdom for Lake. And what will it take for Katie Hobbs to succeed when she becomes governor? Stay with us.